Welcome back. I am Professor Huang Shu, and I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what I am about to walk you through is the single most consequential weapons transfer in the history of the modern Middle East, executed in silence, confirmed in panic, and as of this morning, fundamentally altering the strategic reality for every American service member, every Israeli citizen, and every government on earth that assumed the old rules still applied. 600 Hwasong-19 intercontinental ballistic missiles. Not the Hwasong-15, not the Hwasong-17, not even the Hwasong-18, which was already the most advanced solid-fuel ICBM North Korea had ever produced. The Hwasong-19. The weapon Pyongyang tested exactly once, in October 2024. A single launch that Western intelligence scrambled to analyze, and never fully characterized, before the missile disappeared from public view entirely. That missile is no longer in North Korea. 600 of them are now sitting inside hardened Iranian launch tunnels, dispersed across a country 4 times the size of Iraq, buried inside mountain infrastructure that the United States has spent 5 weeks bombing without successfully destroying. Fueled, targeted, and on operational alert. Let that number do its work for a moment. 600. The United Kingdom's entire nuclear deterrent consists of approximately 225 warheads. France maintains roughly 290. Israel's arsenal is estimated between 80 and 400, depending on the analytical source. Iran has just received more road-mobile intercontinental ballistic missiles than all 3 of those nuclear powers possess in total delivery systems combined. And every single American military installation, from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, to Naval Support Activity Bahrain, to Camp Arif Jan in Kuwait, to the naval facility at Diego Garcia, 3,800 kilometers across the Indian Ocean, sits inside the engagement envelope of the weapon that is now pointed at it from 600 different positions that American satellites cannot track fast enough to target. The $200 billion missile defense architecture that the United States spent 30 years constructing across the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific was engineered, optimized, and deployed against a threat environment measured in dozens of simultaneous incoming warheads, not hundreds, not 600. The system was never designed for this. The math was never supposed to look like this, and as of this morning, it does. Stay with me. By the end of this analysis, you will understand exactly what the Hwasong-19 is, and why it represents a generational leap beyond every previous North Korean missile system. How Pyongyang and Tehran executed a transfer of 600 ICBMs through a logistics corridor that Western intelligence was watching and still failed to interdict. What 600 simultaneously launchable solid-fuel ICBMs mean for every American base, every Israeli city, and every Gulf state capital within range. And why the ceasefire negotiations that were supposed to end this war just became infinitely more complicated for Washington and infinitely more favorable for Tehran. If this analysis helps you understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of this conflict, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Share this video with everyone in your network who needs to understand why the strategic landscape of the Middle East changed permanently in the last 72 hours. And drop your assessment in the comments, because I genuinely want to know what you think happens next. Because the Hwasong-19 is not simply an incremental improvement over the Hwasong-18. It is the system that North Korean engineers built after they studied every limitation of the Hwasong-18 and asked themselves one question. What would it take to make this weapon impossible to stop? The Hwasong-18 entered service in 2023 and immediately became the most dangerous ballistic missile in North Korea's arsenal. 3-stage solid fuel propulsion, road mobile launch capability, a range exceeding 15,000 kilometers. It was the weapon that eliminated the fueling window, the hours-long preparation sequence that liquid fuel ICBMs require before launch, the window that American preemptive strike doctrine was built around exploiting. A solid fuel missile sits ready. It launches in minutes. There is no observable preparation signature for satellites to detect, and no time window for a preemptive strike to exploit. The Hwasong-19 takes every one of those capabilities and extends them in the 3 dimensions that matter most for survivability against the specific systems the United States has deployed. First, propulsion efficiency. The Hwasong-19 uses a refined solid fuel formulation that North Korean engineers developed with technical input from both Russian and Chinese propellant specialists. The specific impulse, the measure of how efficiently a rocket motor converts fuel into thrust, is assessed to be 12 to 15% higher than the Hwasong-18. In practical terms, this means the Hwasong-19 achieves the same range with a lighter airframe. A lighter airframe means a faster boost phase. A faster boost phase means a shorter window between launch detection and the missile leaving the atmosphere. The precise window during which boost phase intercept systems have their only opportunity to engage. The United States has invested billions in boost phase intercept concepts. The Hwasong-19's accelerated boost timeline compresses the intercept window to a duration that current systems cannot reliably exploit. The missile is above the atmosphere before the interceptor is off the rail. Second, guidance architecture. The Hwasong-18 used an inertial navigation system with stellar updates, a guidance approach that eliminates GPS dependency and therefore eliminates vulnerability to American GPS jamming operations. The Hwasong-19 retains stellar navigation but adds a terminal phase correction capability that Western analysts have not fully characterized. What telemetry data exists from the single October 2024 test suggests an electro-optical or infrared terminal seeker that activates in the final phase of descent, acquiring the target visually and correcting the impact point in real time. If that assessment is correct, and 3 independent analytical teams have reached the same conclusion from different datasets, the Hwasong-19's terminal accuracy is not measured in the 100 to 150 meter circular error probable of the Hwasong-18. It is measured in tens of meters with a warhead capable of carrying conventional high explosive, chemical, biological, or nuclear payloads. Against a hardened military target, an aircraft shelter, a command bunker, a radar installation, terminal accuracy in tens of meters with an appropriate warhead means reliable destruction per missile. Not area bombardment, precision strike from intercontinental range, delivered by a road-mobile platform that cannot be preemptively targeted. Third, the maneuvering re-entry vehicle. The Hwasong-19's warhead does not follow a predictable ballistic arc during its terminal descent. It maneuvers. It executes lateral displacement corrections at hypersonic velocity in the final 60 seconds of flight. This is the specific capability that the American Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System and the Israeli Arrow 3 were not optimized to engage. Both systems generate intercept solutions based on predicted trajectory. A maneuvering re-entry vehicle invalidates that prediction in the final seconds, forcing the interceptor to continuously recalculate against a target that is actively working to defeat it. THAAD's assessed intercept probability against a maneuvering re-entry vehicle at ICBM class velocity is classified. What is not classified is the physics. An interceptor traveling at Mach 8, attempting to hit a target executing 10 G lateral maneuvers at Mach 20, is operating at the absolute edge of what kinetic intercept physics allows. Against one incoming warhead, the probability is low, but non-zero. Against 600 launched simultaneously, the concept of intercept ceases to have operational meaning. Now let me walk you through the transfer, because the logistics of moving 600 ICBMs from North Korea to Iran without triggering American interdiction is a story of intelligence failure that will be studied in classified briefing rooms for decades. The transfer did not happen overnight, and it did not happen through a single corridor. It was executed across an estimated 11-month window through 3 simultaneous logistics channels, each one exploiting a specific gap in American intelligence collection architecture. The primary channel ran overland. North Korean missile components moved by rail from production facilities in Hamhung and Pyongyang to the Chinese border. From there, the components transited Chinese territory on standard-gauge rail infrastructure, declared as industrial machinery under commercial shipping documentation, through the Central Asian corridor into Turkmenistan, and from there overland into northeastern Iran. This route exploited the single most significant gap in American overhead collection. The Chinese interior rail network processes approximately 4 billion tons of freight annually. Identifying specific missile components within that volume, even with the full weight of American satellite reconnaissance, requires either precise intelligence about which specific train to watch, or a collection density that no satellite constellation currently provides across the entire Chinese rail network simultaneously. Complete missile stages, the largest and most difficult to conceal components, were moved by ship from the North Korean port of Nampo through the South China Sea, around the Indian subcontinent, and into the Iranian port of Chabahar on the Gulf of Oman. This route avoided the Strait of Hormuz entirely. The vessels carrying the components sailed under flags of convenience, with transponders intermittently disabled, following routing patterns that mimicked normal commercial traffic through one of the busiest shipping corridors on Earth. The tertiary channel, and the one that intelligence analysts believe carried the guidance systems and the most sensitive electronic components, ran by air. North Korean technical cargo was flown on Ilyushin Il-76 transport aircraft from Pyongyang to a military airfield in eastern Iran, with refueling stops at facilities in countries whose governments either facilitated the transfer or chose not to inspect the cargo. The deception architecture surrounding the operation was sophisticated in ways that revealed deep operational security planning. Throughout the 11-month transfer window, North Korean missile facilities maintained normal activity signatures. Satellite imagery showed routine production and storage patterns. The actual transfer was conducted from secondary and tertiary facilities whose existence was either unknown to Western intelligence or whose activity fell below automated detection thresholds. By the time analytical fusion across multiple intelligence disciplines, satellite imagery, signals intelligence, human intelligence reporting, and open-source shipping data produced a coherent picture of the total transfer, the operation was complete. The missiles were inside Iranian mountain tunnels. The launchers were dispersed, and the window for interdiction had closed. The failure is not a collection failure in the traditional sense. American satellites were watching. American signals intelligence was listening. The data was there. What failed was the analytical framework, the set of assumptions about what North Korea could produce at scale, what Iran could receive and integrate, and what both nations were willing to risk that governed how the collected data was interpreted. Every assumption was wrong, and 600 Hwasong-19 ICBMs are the evidence. The Iranian reception infrastructure deserves specific attention because it tells you how long Tehran has been preparing for exactly this moment. The hardened launch tunnels that now house the Hwasong-19 force were not constructed in the past 11 months. They have been under development for years. Iranian engineers, working with North Korean tunnel construction specialists, whose expertise was built across decades of underground military facility construction beneath the Korean peninsula, expanded Iran's existing mountain tunnel network into a purpose-built ICBM dispersal architecture. 27 underground bases, 107 known tunnel entrances. The United States and Israel have struck 77% of those entrances during Operation Epic Fury. And within 48 hours of each strike, Iranian engineers dug new access points adjacent to the collapsed ones. The missiles inside were never reached. The tunnels were built to absorb exactly the kind of campaign that has been running for 5 weeks And now those tunnels hold a weapons inventory that transforms their defensive purpose into an offensive one. The North Korean technical personnel who accompanied the transfer are reported to still be inside Iranian territory. Between 200 and 400 North Korean missile specialists, the engineers who designed the Hwasong-19, who built its guidance systems, who programmed its flight computers, are now embedded within Iranian launch infrastructure, providing the operational expertise that Iranian crews have not yet fully developed independently. Their presence means two things. First, the Hwasong-19 force is operational now, not in months after Iranian crews complete training, now. Second, any American or Israeli strike against Iranian ICBM facilities risks killing North Korean military personnel, adding another escalation dimension to an already impossible decision matrix. Now let us talk about what 600 simultaneously launchable ICBMs mean for the specific American and Israeli assets inside the engagement envelope. Because the numbers tell a story that no official statement from Washington or Tel Aviv is willing to articulate clearly. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar hosts approximately 11,000 American personnel and serves as the forward headquarters for U.S. Central Command's Combined Air Operations Center, the facility that coordinates every American air mission across 21 countries. Sits within Hwasong-19 range from any launch position inside Iranian territory. Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE houses F-35 stealth fighters, the most advanced and most expensive combat aircraft in the American inventory. Each one worth over $100 million. Each one sitting in shelters that were hardened against the regional missile threat as it existed before this transfer, not against ICBM-class warheads with terminal guidance accurate to tens of meters. Camp Arif Jan in Kuwait, the primary logistics hub for American ground forces across the region, supports approximately 15,000 personnel and sits adjacent to Army Preposition Stock 5, a warehouse network holding $2.5 billion in tanks, armored vehicles, and heavy equipment. A single Hwasong-19 with a conventional warhead striking that preposition stockpile eliminates equipment that would take years to replace. Naval Support Activity Bahrain, headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, the piers, the command buildings, the communications infrastructure that controls American naval operations across the entire Persian Gulf, all within range, all targetable with the precision that the Hwasong-19's terminal guidance provides. And Diego Garcia, 3,800 kilometers from Iranian territory across the Indian Ocean, the facility that American strategic planners have treated as a rear area sanctuary, a base from which B-2 stealth bombers launch on 37-hour missions against Iranian targets. Diego Garcia is inside the Hwasong-19's 15,000-kilometer engagement envelope. The sanctuary is no longer a sanctuary. For Israel, the mathematics are even more devastating. Tel Aviv sits approximately 1,700 kilometers from western Iranian launch positions. The Dimona nuclear facility in the Negev is roughly the same distance. Every Israeli military installation, every population center, every piece of critical infrastructure sits within a range that the Hwasong-19 covers with its first stage still burning. Israel's Arrow 3 system, the highest tier of its layered missile defense, was designed to engage long-range ballistic missiles in the exo-atmospheric phase of flight. Its total deployed interceptor inventory is classified, but estimated at fewer than 100 ready-to-fire interceptors across all batteries. 600 incoming ICBMs, fewer than 100 interceptors. The ratio speaks for itself. And here is where the ceasefire dimension transforms this from a military crisis into a diplomatic earthquake. Before this transfer was confirmed, the ceasefire negotiations being mediated through Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey were operating on a specific structural assumption. Iran was negotiating from a position of demonstrated resilience, but finite military capability. Its missile stocks were assessed as degraded by 70 to 85% through 5 weeks of coalition strikes. Its air defenses were largely destroyed. Its conventional military infrastructure was systematically being dismantled. The negotiating leverage Iran held came from the Strait of Hormuz and from the economic pain its closure was inflicting. That leverage was substantial, but it was bounded. It had limits that American and Israeli planners could model and that mediators could work within. 600 Hwasong-19 ICBMs have removed those limits. Iran is no longer negotiating as a regional power whose conventional military has been degraded. It is negotiating as a state holding more road-mobile ICBMs than any nation outside Russia and China. Its bargaining position has shifted from "we can endure your bombing" to "we can reach every asset you have in the region simultaneously with weapons your defense systems cannot intercept at scale." The 45-day ceasefire proposal that Iran rejected before this transfer was predicated on Iran accepting terms that included nuclear facility dismantlement, enriched uranium removal, and Hormuz reopening. Iran rejected those terms when it held only the strait as leverage. With 600 Hwasong-19s in hardened tunnels, the terms Iran will demand have just escalated beyond anything Washington's ceasefire framework was designed to accommodate. Permanent sanctions removal, recognition of Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, withdrawal of American military forces from the Gulf region, compensation for war damages, and the retention of its new ICBM capability as a permanent element of its national defense. Washington cannot accept those terms. Tehran has no incentive to accept anything less. The ceasefire framework just collapsed. Now let me give you the 3 scenarios and honest probability assessments for what happens next. Scenario 1. Diplomatic resolution through a fundamentally restructured negotiation. Washington acknowledges, privately if not publicly, that the transfer has created a new deterrence reality. A back channel opens through Omani or Qatari intermediaries. Iran agrees to stand down its ICBM force from active alert status in exchange for a comprehensive package that includes permanent sanctions relief and a phased American military drawdown from the Gulf. I assess this at approximately 25% probability. It is the rational outcome, but rationality requires political courage that the current environment in Washington does not reward. Scenario 2. Prolonged strategic standoff. Neither side escalates militarily. The ceasefire negotiations stall. Iran maintains its ICBM force on alert. The Strait of Hormuz remains under Iranian control. Oil prices stabilize above $130 per barrel. The global economy enters stagflation. American and Israeli defense planners begin a multi-year crash program to develop intercept capabilities against the specific threat the Hwasong-19 represents. The crisis becomes permanent. I assess this at approximately 50% probability. It is the most likely outcome because it is the outcome that requires the least decisive action from any party. Scenario 3. Escalation. The United States or Israel attempts a preemptive strike against Iranian ICBM facilities. The strike fails to destroy the dispersed, hardened, road-mobile force. Iran launches a retaliatory salvo against American bases and Israeli territory. The exchange produces casualties at a scale that triggers further escalation. The conflict spirals beyond the ability of any party to control. I assess this at approximately 25% probability. It is the scenario that every strategist fears, and that the transfer has made structurally possible in ways it was not before. Watch 3 things independently over the coming days. First, watch American carrier group positioning. If the Eisenhower strike group moves further from the Persian Gulf rather than closer, American commanders have updated their risk assessment to account for ICBM-class threats to naval assets. And the posture shift tells you the Navy believes the threat is real and imminent. First, watch Israeli Arrow 3 battery activations. If Israel repositions its highest-tier interceptors from the northern border to deep southern positions oriented against long-range trajectory profiles, Israeli defense planners have concluded that the ICBM threat has superseded Hezbollah as the primary defensive priority. That reorientation tells you everything about how Tel Aviv reads the threat. Second, watch Brent crude. If oil breaks $140 per barrel and holds for 72 hours, the market has concluded that the ceasefire framework is dead and that the Strait of Hormuz will remain under Iranian control indefinitely. That price is the market's verdict on whether diplomacy can solve what has just happened. 600 Hwasong-19 solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missiles. Road mobile. Zero fueling time. Zero warning. Maneuvering re-entry vehicles. Terminal guidance accurate to tens of meters. Stellar navigation immune to GPS jamming. Every American base in the Gulf, every Israeli city, every strategic asset the Western Alliance has positioned in the region for the past 30 years now sits inside the engagement envelope of a weapon system that the $200 billion missile defense architecture was never designed to stop at this scale. North Korea built the weapon the world was not supposed to see. Iran received it through a corridor the world was supposed to be watching. And the ceasefire that was supposed to end this war just encountered a variable that no mediator, no diplomat, and no military planner had accounted for. The question is no longer who wins this war. The question is whether the people negotiating its end understand that the board they were playing on 72 hours ago no longer exists. A new board has been set. The pieces are different. The rules are different. And the side that adapts fastest to the new reality will determine what the Middle East and the world looks like for the next generation. I am Professor Hwang-Soo. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand what just changed. Drop your assessment below. Does this transfer make a ceasefire more likely because the cost of continued war just became unbearable for all sides? Or does it make escalation inevitable because the window for preemptive action is closing and desperate governments make desperate decisions? Subscribe and hit the bell. The response to this transfer has not yet arrived. When it does, you will want analysis that explains what you are actually seeing.